Hello, my name is Margaret Adele. A couple years ago, I released a video that was all about MLM, the queer book thing, not the predatory business model, books written by queer men. Because I'd noticed that while everyone seemed to enjoy books about queer men, a lot of femme or just outright straight women authors were getting elevated in the space above queer men telling their own stories, and everyone seemed to always be chill with it because there might be a small chance that there was some closeted transmascs among them. And this list will have transmasc people on it, but really, like every other kind of identity, we should be elevating the people in that space writing their own stories first and foremost. And when I got a comment not too long ago talking about that video, I realized how much I enjoyed making it and how outdated it was and how many more books I had to talk about. And that's where this video comes in. Let's do an update on more queer achillean books written by queer men/transmasc people. Yes, it doesn't say that in the title, but SEO is a bitch. Curator's note. To the best of my knowledge, every author on this list is either a queer man or some level of transmasc. But as gender can be a fickle thing, it might happen that someone doesn't necessarily want to be on a list of queer men and transmasc people. If that is the case and you know that for a fact, please let me know. And if there are any awkward jump cuts or the video suddenly changes length, well, no, that just means that somebody quietly bowed out and we'll let it go. Oak King, Holly King by Sebastian Nothwell is a queer fantasy romance following Butcher, a fairy knight that has just won the Queen's Tournament. And he's looking for his prize, and his prize is getting named the Oak King, which would be a great prize if it didn't come with a ritual sacrifice. Every solstice, both winter and summer, there is a duel between the Oak King and the Holly King. On the winter solstice, the Oak King kills the Holly King, thereby to bring back summer, and then on the summer solstice, the Holly King does it to him. And Butcher really doesn't want to be ritually sacrificed, even for the magic that keeps the seasons going, so he uses a magical scrying acorn, because Fae, and that acorn leads him into the human realm, Victorian England, and to a young, seemingly nobody clerk named Wren. After some convincing, Wren does agree to help the hot medievally looking dude not die on either of the solstices. Just one problem. He doesn't really know how. But again, Butcher's hot, so we'll try it. I listened to this audiobook as an Indie Ink Awards judge because it is up for Best Audiobook Narration, and the audiobook narrator was fantastic. I believe, I'm going to forget, Gary Furlow, I believe was the narrator. Editing, Margaret?
Gary Furlong.
Thank you. Now, I listened to a little bit of this narrator before in another audiobook that I actually DNF'd, but it wasn't because of his voice. His voice is sexy as fuck, especially when it comes to achillean romances, which I think is kind of like his whole vibe. I looked up his, library, discography, whatever, and he does a lot of these kinds of books, and chef's kiss perfection. Definitely one of those books where you'll want to pick the audiobook. And his voice for Butcher, true name Shrike, because of course he gives Wren his true name at one point. He's one of those characters where, he doesn't say a lot, right? He's, generally quiet spoken, but when he does speak, the narrator puts so much emotion into his voice, and his, dedication to Wren is, so good. Now, there were sex scenes, and usually sex scenes in an audiobook are so iffy for me because hearing another human reading a sex scene out loud is really, it's something. And these were particularly funny because I'm pretty sure the author is British and they use the pseudonym Prick for a dick, and for some reason my American brain just thought that was so funny. So funny. And also a lot of sword euphemisms. Just so many. But, of course, the narrator is, really good at this kind of thing, so it went really well. There was one point in the middle where, it was a little bit slowish for me, but it picked up, and there was a twist near the end with a pick of the new Holly King that I loved, and there was a side character that is revealed to be trans that I caught. Okay, I caught early. because I'm always looking for side characters to turn out to be trans, apparently. But I loved this book so much that after, reading it, rating it, shortly after, I then discovered that there was a sequel short story collection taking place after the end of this book. And I read it like 2 days after I finished this one because I just got tired of waiting. And I did hear, after looking up stuff by the author for other booktube, bookstagram, book, whatever, influencer life, that there will be another book, that this is becoming like its own series, and I'm so here for it. This book is honestly probably gonna make my top list of the year, I'm not gonna lie, but again, audiobook is where it's at for this one. You Had Me at Happy Hour by Timothy Janofsky, one of those. Admittedly, this book is on here because I like to provide a wide range of books in these kind of rec lists so that everyone can walk away with one, because this is not my vibe generally, just like from an artistic standpoint. This is a queer rom-com style contemporary romance all about a bartender and a sommelier that end up working at the same bar, and they decide, as these rom-com protagonists so often do, that they're going to start a no-strings-attached sexual relationship, all right? Just for the fun of it and the chemistry and nothing else is going to happen except, oh no, feelings happen. Now, rom-coms and contemporary romances already aren't my vibe usually. I only read this one because I needed to fulfill a specific prompt for an old reading challenge, and I get the gist that this is something that the author kind of like lives in, that this is the author's vibe, these queer rom-com style contemporary romances. Now, I did appreciate the OCD rep, because our sommelier Julian does have OCD, and I particularly liked, and this might just be a me thing, that the sex scenes weren't perfect. By that I mean, like, they weren't automatically like explosive just because they cared that much about each other. There were awkward things. There were, situations with medication making certain aspects of the act hard. There were things with OCD making certain acts off limits, and the two having to essentially like work their way through it and find the middle ground where they could accommodate all of their needs. So I liked it in that respect because it just was a more realistic view of how sex works, especially with the realities of both of their needs. So that one I really liked, but just the general like deciding whether or not to take the big job in the city and that kind of thing isn't normally my cup of tea. But if you do like rom-coms, especially queer rom-coms, this one would probably be right up your alley. The Flowered Blade by Taylor Hubbard did the impossible. It made me enjoy a kidnapping romance. Okay, I struggle a lot with kidnapping romances because I am a stubborn bitch. You restrict my movements, you keep me captive, I fucking hate you for life. Don't start acting cute. There's fucking nothing here. Walk away. So I have a struggle getting into them, but this one was so expertly done. We have a young prince named Silver, whose father is a tyrant warlord, doing the tyrant warlord stuff, and Silver is by no means a good warlord prince, but he still wants to make Dad happy, so he decides to go across the kingdom to get the taxes from the nobles that haven't paid the full amount. He's not good at it. By the time we see him at the beginning of this story, he hasn't gotten any of the extra taxes, and then, whoops, gets kidnapped by orcs. Now, our orc chief, Brokil, does not actually want to be kidnapping people, but his clan is nearing destitution because of the bullshit the tyrant has been pulling, and this is their last resort. They are going to kidnap the prince and tell the king if he does not stop his nonsense and actually open real, fair negotiations with them, his son dies. Now, there was some very excellent pacing in this book because it was careful not to make too much stuff happen too soon, and also it showed very early that Brokil doesn't really want to be doing this, that he is much more like pacifistic by nature, and that he has been pushed into this by sheer desperation. He's in charge of a clan that is very nearly going to start going hungry if they can't figure this out. And I really appreciated that aspect of, the captor doesn't really want to be doing this, and he thinks He's so sure that the king is not going to like refuse. He's so sure that this is gonna work and that he won't have to harm Silver at all, that that's what makes it okay in his head. Silver's not so sure. Silver's like, you don't know my dad. He might actually let me die. And so there's this tension hanging out the entire time, even as the two begin to speak and grow closer. The idea that, what's going to happen if the king calls his bluff and Broquille actually has to follow through with this. And I loved that tension. It was delicious. There is a kind of not a tension change, almost a genre change halfway through the book, where it becomes like cozy fantasy cottagecore as they're basically just like hanging out with the orc clan waiting for the king's reply, and you see Silver like taking up new crafts and reading and seeing all the agricultural spaces around. I loved that aspect, even though I don't usually like cozy romances, but I think it was because the threat of death was looming over all of them, and there were some fantastically delicious angsty parts with some plot twists. And speaking of plot twists, my favorite was actually at the very end, when they figure out how to handle the Tyrant King, like overall. So good. I love that. Like it gets like, it becomes one of those political fantasies, like just for a second. This book just seems to cycle through subgenres of fantasy romance. And I really liked that. Like I said, this was a miraculous discovery that I actually liked a kidnapping romance. And this does seem to be a book that I see popping up a lot as a beloved fantasy indie romance. It is up for an Indie Ink Awards. I could not read and review for it because I'd already read it. Heartbroken. Because I would have picked it. It is also a trans romance. Our friend Silver is got the, I believe, you will be seeing it up here, but obviously I do not have a floating image of the cover as I sit here. I believe you can see Silver's top scars in the cover, if I remember correctly. But it's never like a thing. Like, for all that his dad, horrifically horrible tyrant warlord, not transphobic. Because, like, why does he need to be transphobic? He's so many other horrible things. Like, that one thing he doesn't need to be. And nobody really is either. I don't think anybody else is really I don't remember any points of transphobia in this. So, it has earned its place as one of the cherry-picked faves of recent memory, and one you should check out. Angels Before Men by Rafael Nicolas is not a romance. Not at all. But it does, in fact, ask the question, what if Lucifer had been a blonde twink? And like, once you've asked it, yeah, obviously, this follows the actual fallen angel Lucifer from his creation through his time in heaven and his fall. And it is hyper magical realism-y, which is strange for me. And it's not even like it's low magical realism. Not the author himself on social media says that reading back through it, there were some paragraphs he doesn't even know what he was talking about. And it almost does kind of work though, right? Because it's heaven. Like, the book almost exclusively takes place in heaven and the cosmos and stuff. So like, it not really being discernible to mortal brains is like fine. It goes. And yes, there were a lot of points where I was like, that's a pretty sentence. I don't know what it means. There was a lot of that, but this is not cutesy. Okay, this is not some like sanitized, whitewashed version of the story where Lucifer's fall was actually chill and he was actually consented to it. No, it's bloody, it's ragged, there's one scene between Lucifer and God that this is not a queer, warm, fuzzy book. This is a queer, I want to burn down the world to spite God book. But regardless, there is a weird situationship thing between Lucifer and the Archangel Michael, but it's one of those like, yeah, a lot of their interactions very clearly read as romantic, but because these are angels before man, they don't really have any sense of romance or any sense of sex, because that's not how anybody here has been created. And of course, Lucifer's one of the ones that introduces that stuff. And I have heard that Lucifer and Archangel Michael's relationship does get even more twisted and angsty throughout the trilogy. It is a trilogy. I have read the sequel. The sequel's even more fucked up. I didn't think that was possible. It doesn't focus exclusively on Lucifer. It focuses on the other angels that go down to Earth and end up procreating with humans and creating those monstrosities that you might have heard about from Genesis. So also fucked up, but that one's even more. So this one, if you struggle to handle this one, I caution you against moving forward. Definitely for the religious trauma girlies, but also is just so artfully done, and Lucifer as a complex character is so like, oh, so good. And the weird situationship between him and Michael. There were some points, especially near like the middle section, you know, after all the introduction of Lucifer and what heaven is like, and then the beginning of the fall, that can read a little bit slow, just because there's not a lot going on in heaven. You know, it's heaven, perfection's low-key boring. But the final third, so good. If you want the vibes, you can always go to the author's social media pages. Like, there's a lot of pictures of fan art that is so perfectly encapsulating the vibes that'll give you an idea of what you're in for. But yeah, definitely not for the faint of heart, this one. Defeating Demons and Breaking Up with My Boyfriend by Dylan James is a queer YA horror focusing on a group of friends going camping at the end of their senior year. I don't know, it's Canadian, whatever the Canadian senior year is. Now, Eli and Brady have been boyfriends for a while, and Eli is determined to make some fantastic memories over the course of this trip because he's planning on breaking up with Brady at the end of it. He is about to age out of the foster care system and is so pessimistic about what his future looks like, he thinks Brady would be better off without him. Now, as a former foster parent, admittedly in America, he does have reason to be anxious about the state of his future. Being in the system does set a lot of youth up for a not great time after, but like, he's also just got some self-esteem issues in general, and as part of their camping situation, they decide to go on a hike and discover this old set of churchy looking ruins. They have a little bit of fun getting creeped out by it and make to leave, except Eli can't leave. He tries, there's some kind of invisible wall, and he tries to call ahead to his friends, but something wearing his face is already walking back to camp with them. That's right, we got a very good body snatcher horror, one of my favorites, some of the best tension. It does pull a couple moments where you're like, wait, is that really that person talking? Are they really themselves? Like, I love that aspect a lot. This is also what I would call a capital Q queer, I don't know why that's so hard to say, horror, because it focuses on not just the queer romances, but also queer themes. We hear talk about conversion camps. There's a lot of references to a historic sapphic romance in the area. And so there's a lot of talk about just the community as a whole. There's also a lot of talk about Eli working through his stuff. Admittedly, it's a bit on the nose, an analogy, you know, fighting actual demons as analogous for your internal demons, but it's YA, so I'll let it be on the nose for readers like less than half my age at this point. There also was a lot of like very anime style magic of friendship type dialogue in this, but again, I'll let it slide because queer YA. But in general, the tension and a lot of the scenes was done very well, and the working through of certain, you know, personal issues was represented so well. I really appreciated this one. It is a novella, so you know, if you like the shorter books, that'd probably be right up your alley. I actually prefer novellas best when it's a horror, because I feel like in some aspects, like you don't want to delve too deeply into the horror because you want there to be some mystery, right? So that works really well for me and could work really well for you if you're a horror buff, especially a queer horror buff. The superior horror. Curiosity Caught the Demon by Travis Bedoin. I should not like this book, okay? By all of my other reading likes and dislikes, this should not work. It's a novella romance. I don't usually like any romances under 200 pages at minimum. But also, the main conflict is also very, like, hallmarky rom-com-y, which is also not usually my vibe. But there are two reasons why this works. One, the author. Travis Bedoin is an author I've been working with for a very long time. One of my auto yes authors. He does gay pining fantastically. And two, there's a demon. Maybe Hallmark should try adding more demons and then I'd be more interested. Regardless, this is all about Gremory, who gets pulled into the human realm because of some random dude's mistaken wish. Scotty is about to have his grandma's shop taken away from him. It was supposed to be his inheritance, but greedy businessmen are trying to buy it out to turn their picturesque downtown into a series of chain stores, and his greedy relatives want him to go through with it. Sales haven't been super great lately, and he's afraid he'll have to cave. So he makes a wish on a star, and somehow, I honestly don't remember, it's been so long since I read this, that pulls Gremory, our demon, into this world. Now, the entire book is actually from Gremory's point of view, which was super interesting to me, even though I don't usually like romances that are single POV. Just having the entire POV be from the demon was a lot of fun because he just views things differently. And he tells himself that he's only helping this human because he's so sure that he can convince him to sell his soul after the fact. And totally not because Scotty's a hottie, but like, we'll see. Anyway, so it really is fun because it is that kind of juxtaposition between the hallmark, we've got to band together as small businesses to fight back against the big corporations, with very paranormal sex scenes. I really like that. There was never any like just standard straight up sex scene that could have happened between two humans. It was always some element of Gremory's powers coming in, which I really like. Like, if you're going to have a paranormal romance with a participant that has like supernatural powers, use it. And there's one scene. Did not know demonic possession could be that sexy. Anyway, there was also some scenes like actually in hell. Now in this like universe, hell isn't like this strictly bad place, or if it is, it's like we're here as part of the general ecosystem of the bad people need to go somewhere to be punished, but not all of hell is horrible type deal. And there are several scenes in it, and I remember, like, even though I don't always do very well with certain descriptions, especially when they're like supernatural, like even all this time later, easily over a year, if not a year and a half later, I can still remember like what those descriptions were like and what the scenes in hell looked like. So it was super well done. And even though it was such a rom-com plot, the demon aspect made up for it. So I don't know, maybe if you are in it for a rom-com plot, the demon might, detract. But, I would still say give it a shot because it might just add even more. Pray for Him by Tyler Battaglia is a queer horror, adult horror this time, following a priest with a kind of empathy, kind of empathic powers that he thinks is a direct gift from God and therefore brought him into the priesthood. He discovers that his bestie, his best friend Hector of so many years, is possessed. Not a sexy demonic possession this time. He doesn't even really believe that Hector's daughter Violet, when she comes over and says hey, my dad's got a thing, can you do something? But after going to his house and doing more research, he's like, oh, no, shit, that's a demonic possession. But the problem is that Hector's not a believer. He's not in the parish. He doesn't believe at all. And Isaiah, his bishop, is like, you shouldn't be bothering at all. He's not in the belief. You should be caring. You shouldn't be putting all of your energy towards this. You should be caring about your parish. But this is his bestie. He can't give up. And don't you know, as things go on, he realizes just the extent to which he cannot live without Hector and the extent of certain things that have been unsaid between them. Oh, so good. So good. We definitely have that kind of, that exorcism trope where the priest is in a crisis of faith and he's so sure that this is where God wants him to be, but he's not sure of himself. He doesn't think he can handle it, mostly because his bishop is telling him he can't, and he just needs to save Hector so badly. He can't imagine life without it. And of course the demon is playing on that. And this demon makes Hector say, oof, but he can't give up. And it goes on for days and days and days, and it is grueling and it is exhausting. There were some fun little twists and turns right at the end, and the general vibe is very much like, why are you actually here? Why did you actually join this religion? And can you get that from somewhere else? Because it is focused on a lot of the rigidity. Like, you have the bishop that's telling him, no, you can't help this person in danger because they're not, on our team. And there's a lot of talk of why Isaiah even ended up in that Catholic orphanage in the first place. Why did his parents give him up? Was it just because they thought his weird empathy gifts meant he should be there? And so he's got a lot of things to work work through. And, one of those, the exorcism can't work until he's worked through them. There is some disability rep with Violet. I forget exactly what kind, but she does use mobility aids, and what are they, canes? Are they the one that the crutches things, but they have the little thing that goes around your arm? I'm not saying this at all correctly, but she does have a chronic illness, and maybe she has a little queer side thing of her own. But I really liked this one. It was very creepy. It was very atmospheric, but also, again, one of that capital Q queer type things of working through broader concepts rather than just them having feelings for each other, which is really my preferred genre of queer book. I really like the ones that focus more on wider queer themes than just this is a queer relationship. But it is, it can get very blasphemous at certain points, but it does have a very adorable ending, like you would want, as a palate cleanser after all the horrible stuff you just read through. A Bone in His Teeth by Kellen Graves. I saw this author on my social feeds a lot and heard great things, and so when I saw their name on a book in the Indie Ink Awards, I was like, reserve? And I was not disappointed. This follows Alba, a young man who lives in this essentially company port town where everyone has more or less been forced to work for this shipping company, whether they want to or not. And he comes back from a usual trip and discovers his mother missing. Now, he knows that she could not have gotten away from this horribly rigid company town without a lot of risk to herself, and so there was some really big reason she had to go. Now, a little while after, he does get a cryptic note of where he can go to find her in Moon Harbor. Thus begins his epic escape to find his mother. But when he gets to Moon Harbor, she's not there. Instead, he finds an open lighthouse keeper position and takes it to have a reason to stay. But the town's got its own secrets, including, as he later discovers, that there used to be a lot of mer people here that have all disappeared. And one of the only remaining survivors, who has also recently returned, is demanding that Alba help him discover what happened to his kin. Now, I always love me a good monster romance, and this is definitely monstrous, okay? Our mermaid friend with a name I could not hope to pronounce has some nice sharp teeth and all of that. There are some great, very not vanilla sex scenes that I appreciated. I was a little bit nervous because at one point you do see that our mer friend can transform into a two-legged humanoid looking form, and I was like, oh, he better not stay like that. He better not. I did not open a monster fucker romance to see some human dude. Thankfully, no. But there are some great horror elements, specifically in the beginning of this book. It sets up the vibe so well. The lighthouse, house, the actual house that Alba is living in, is partially jutting out into the water. And there are so many times in the dead of night where it sounds like something is trying to come up through the trapdoor from the water into his home. Oh, so good. That trapdoor, man. That trapdoor kept me fucked up through this book. But my favorite was a scene fairly early on. Alba has to dispose of a dead body. Long story. But he's out in a rowboat on the quiet ocean in the dead of night with a dead body in the boat when something speaks to him out of the darkness. Perfection. Now, admittedly, there were a couple twists and turns in this book that were kind of obvious because there just weren't enough side characters for it to not be obvious. But the creep factor and the relationship and, of course, the great sex scenes more than makes up for that. More so. I particularly enjoyed this one. I keep telling myself that I gotta go back to Kellen Graves. I might be a little bit caught up in my finish all your series challenge, but I will come back. Eventually. A Guide to Order by Alex Pendragon is a queer contemporary erotica following two high schoolers, 18, getting into some stuff. When I wrote the blog post for this concept, I called this one the most controversial on the list. And I think the author Loki agreed with me because while they are 18, they are legal, they're also in high school. So it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. But this follows Jock Garrett, who he really wants to get to know that loner Brady better. For no reason. Just, think he's got a cool vibe. And as he's trying to make conversation with Brady in detention, cause reasons, he discovers that Brady is on this app where people can pay you money to make requests for specific kinds of videos. And Garrett's like, well, I could use some cash. College is coming up. I'll get on there. And as he asks Brady for help, and Brady ends up kind of appearing in the background of one of his videos, someone then asks for a scene of the two of them together. And they realize that they could probably make some money if they just, did some stuff together. So they endeavor to do so. And Garrett is suddenly like, what is this feeling? So sudden and new. It was really fun. I'm not going to lie. There are so many moments where, the client, I guess, asks for the very generic dominant jock, submissive geek stereotype. And so Garrett is like trying to be all like dominant and stuff. But on the inside, he's like, oh God, what do I do? This is weird. Am I hurting him? What am I doing? It's so good. Just the juxtaposition. And many people might say that it's strange that it takes Garrett so long to find out that he's not straight. But I might have had a longer than I'm willing to admit period of time in which I had a series of daydreams about having a girlfriend. Her name was Christine. She had dark hair. Yes, from Phantom of the Opera. Neither Raoul nor fucking Eric deserved her. I could have been so much better for her. Regardless, I had this series of daydreams about having a girlfriend, all the while swearing I was straight. So Garrett was too real. Now, this is definitely a happy for now situation. The author has discussed that, especially in the current zeitgeist, a happy forever situation for a queer couple is a little bit too unrealistic for him, but he also just appreciates the nature of enjoy what you have while you have it. Don't assume that you're going to have everything for forever. Live in the moment type deal. So there is if not an overly optimistic ending, at least a very cute one. Of course, the sex scenes were very fun. Again, they are both legal, but I know that might be too much for some. And overall, I probably do need to pick up the rest of this author's work at some point. I don't default to erotica, like picking a book unless it's right in front of me. Or, I get it sent for a review. That happens too. 3 Meant to Be by M.N. Bennett follows Dorian, a grumpy asshole of a mind reader who at one point in his life was part of a trio of up-and-coming superheroes, basically some of the best magical law enforcement their city had ever seen. And they were also in a polycule. And everything was going great until one of them dies. Dorian, in his grief, not only abandons the enforcers, but also abandons his remaining lover, Milo, to become a teacher at a magic school. Now, Milo, being the clairvoyant, is sure that they can still have a happy ending and pursues Dorian. While they don't have the relationship they had once, they are still physical to a certain extent. And when Milo kisses Dorian, he accidentally gives the mind reader a vision of one of his new students dying. Dorian, determined not to lose anyone else, sets off an investigation to figure out just what is hounding his new student. Now, I don't usually like books set in magic schools. They seem to be very unrealistic from an education standpoint, but this one was written by a working teacher and it shows. So many little in-jokes that if you work in education, you will get. Things like how the district is so excited to announce this new district-wide initiative that's supposed to be a 5-year plan, but damn well they're going to drop it after 2 years when it doesn't immediately start doing everything they want it to do. Too real. It was too real. Regardless, I liked the magic system to a certain extent. It is branching, so it's there's different areas and then you can pick a different lane in that area. Admittedly, I don't remember it very well because this is another one of those books that I read a while ago. And part of the problem is that the book is essentially trying to explain an entire homeroom worth of students' magical abilities at once. So it was a little bit confusing trying to understand everything. But I did like the learning of certain things. And we had a lot of training segments where you could see the magic in action as they were learning how to use things. And that came in very helpful when there was an actual battle to be fought. I loved that aspect. But most importantly, I really wanted to read this book for the express purpose of what is grieving one member of a polycule look like when other members are still alive. Like, that's what I was really like intrigued by. And you could definitely see that the member that passed was like the linchpin. Like, Milo and Dorian would not have gotten together on their own. They needed someone else. And so now, like, they don't know how to be together without that bridge. And they had to like essentially rebuild the connection between them. And I loved that aspect. I loved Milo, who looks so cheery and optimistic on the surface. But then like you realize beyond the book that he's still grieving too. Like, he also loved their third. And it was so good. The dramatic points at the end and the reveal of the depth of feelings. So good. Loved it so much. It's a setup to a series, so I would highly recommend this one if you want discussions on grief, some in-jokes from working in education, and a pretty fleshed out magic system. And that is the list. If you have any more MLM or achillean books written by queer men or transmasc authors, please drop them down in the comments below. I am always taking recommendations. And with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.